I quit my corporate job, but I want to start this story in 8th grade because that's when my mentality shifted about work. In the second semester of 8th grade, I found out that I had failed a project and it was a test grade and I had gotten a 50. From that point on, I told myself I'm never going to fail anything again. I'm going to get all A's throughout the rest of middle school and high school. The mentality of school and work excellence carried over to high school, to college, and also to work. There was a slow shift from Jesus as my number one in my life to work and school excellence. Fast forward to college, I had gotten an internship, and during that internship, I was working really long hours, and I was saying, "Oh, this is not that bad because, after 15 hours of work, I could at least go home and not have to do homework." And I thought that was great because that was better than what my life was like in college. So that gives you an idea of what my life was like in college. So going into the line of work that I did, I knew what I was signing up for. I knew that there would be certain periods in the year where I had to work really long hours. But after my second year of doing that, I was kind of sick of doing that. I was like, this is way too much. And I was praying, God, can I quit? And while I was praying, the thought came to mind. God was saying, I'm going to use your hardship here as training. And so the verse that's related to that is, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one or love the other, or you will be devoted to one or despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Luke 16:10-13. Basically, I was discerning that God wanted to use my secular job to train up my management skills, stewardship skills, and also integrity. Eventually, I enjoyed my work a lot. I loved working with people, first of all. I love to build teams. I love working with complex systems and understanding complex systems. I love to strategize and to research and to write strategy and to implement strategy and to plan and to project manage. I loved all of that. The only thing I didn't like was just working super long hours. So to give you an idea, I remember having to look up my hours report once, and my average was like 75 to 80 for the past I don't even know how many weeks. Now, don't get me wrong, I was seeing the effects of workaholism because that's what it was for me. I was ignoring my personal issues and just focusing on work. I had gained around 40 pounds in just a few years. When I was laying down to sleep, I could feel my spine kind of tingle from just sitting down so much during the day. I remember that I was getting really stressed at times because I was lacking sleep and there were pressures of deadlines. At one point, this actually happened twice in one season. I was concentrating so hard that I was having gray outs. So you know how if you stand up really quickly, you kind of get dizzy? Well, I was getting that feeling, but I was just sitting and concentrating. I also felt like I was losing my mind at points because I remember one time I was driving to work, but I was driving the exact opposite way for like 5 minutes and I didn't even realize it until 5 minutes later, and then I had to make a U-turn. And those kind of things never happened to me before. During that time, I heard a question. If someone followed you around during the day, what would they say is most important to you? At that time, I would have just said, well, Jesus is most important to me, and because that's the answer I would have always given, but I had no idea to actually think through it. To fast forward around, I want to say a month and a half or 2 months before I quit, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was running from a college campus all throughout a city, and then I was running really fast, and then I was stopped at this park. So I stopped at the park in a run in my dream, and the park was right next to a river, and there was a little railing. And I remember looking across in the river, and I would see a skyline. And then after I was standing there for a little bit, I decided to run a little bit more, and then I woke up. So sometimes when I have dreams, I just forget about them. But this dream, even after very long work days, I would still remember it. So I just decided to journal it and write it down. Even though I didn't know what it meant. So around a month later, I had to go to New York City for training, and I had never been to New York City. Actually, the location of training was in Hoboken. So if you know, you have to get off the train station at Hoboken, and then you can walk on the riverside. And when I first got there, I looked to my right, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think that's the skyline that I was seeing in my dream. I had never been to New York before, so I didn't really know what it looked like in person, and obviously I'd never been to that little park there. Later in this video, I'll tell you the meaning of the dream because I didn't understand the meaning until after I had quit. Actually, I didn't even remember the dream until after I had quit. So after training, I was on the train back to where I was living, and I remember there was the time that I got the call to quit. I was really going back and forth. I was like, God, I'm in the middle of a project. I can't just quit. People are going to hate me if I quit in the middle of a project. So I told God, I'm not going to quit until this project is over. Honestly, the timeline of that wasn't a huge deal because it was only around like 3 or 4 weeks out before the project was over. But the main problem I was having was, should I even quit in the first place? I remember it was on a Saturday, and I had just worked in the morning because I remember I had to work weekends. After I had done what I needed to do for that day, I was just spending the whole entire rest of the day just praying. It wasn't until in the evening where I had the sudden memory of a conversation that someone had said, if you ever quit, then make sure that you're running towards something else and not running away from your current job. And whenever I thought about that, I was like, oh, this is exactly that situation. I'm not running away from my current job. In fact, I actually liked the substance of what I was doing, but I am getting a call to leave. That night, I felt peace about that. But the very next day, or maybe even a couple of days later, I remember being stressed out again because I was thinking, okay, well, I'm about to give up my whole entire career, and it's financial stability. I was just thinking, God, like, is this a wise idea? I was so stressed. I remember I was pacing out and in of my bedroom, and while I was doing that, the sudden thought came again, was remember how you had seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and remember, like, all those people, they spent their whole entire careers building up this company. They're letting go of control over the company. And if they can do that, then you who, you've only spent a couple years building your career, you can also give it up. So I obeyed God and I quit. But afterwards, I was still kind of shaky about it, especially about the financial security part of it. And so at that time, I was reading Isaiah, and it says, you women who are so complacent, rise up and listen to me. You daughters who feel secure, hear what I have to say. In little more than a year, you who feel secure will tremble. The grape harvest will fail, and the harvest of the fruit will not come. Isaiah 32, 9 through 10. So I know the context of that passage is a little bit different from mine, but what I got from that was the feeling of security. So God was saying to these people, you guys feel secure, but that's not true security. True security comes from God. So I was having a feelings of security from having a stable job, but that wasn't the source of my security, which is my Heavenly Father. I had believed in my head intellectually that I knew God was a good father, but now I had to actually live that out. There's a couple of verses in this time that really encouraged me, which says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And also, truly I tell you, Jesus replied, no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life. So at this time, I was very encouraged, but I was still sometimes having doubts. And in the days I had doubts, one of those days, I woke up and I suddenly remembered the dream that I had before I quit, and I understood the meaning. So I was running from a college campus, and so remember I was running really hard throughout the city. I had remembered one of my friends had said, all of us, my classmates, have been running since we graduated, but you've been sprinting. And so what that represents is that I was working so hard during the time I was working, and that was, running through the city. And then remember in my dream, I had stopped at the riverside at Hoboken, and that represents how during that training, that's when I got the call to quit. And then the last part of my dream was after I had stopped there a little, I ran a little bit more, and then I woke up. And so what that represents is that I told God I'm going to finish these projects for a little bit, and then I'm going to quit. So the fact that God had told me what would happen before it happened, and then it happening the way he said it would happen, it really encouraged me because it reminded me that my whole life is in God's hands. So after I quit, because I had so much free time, I thought, oh, I need to fill it with all these extra things because my definition of work was being productive at all hours of the day. But God's definition of work is different. I think at least one version of God's definition of work is just simply doing what God has called you to do, and that with honor to God and recognition of God, so taking rest. And so So I really had to learn how to rest and be still before God. It's not, don't work and do nothing at all, because work in itself is a blessing from God, but it's not, work so hard and try to provide everything by yourself, because then that's not trusting God and not recognizing that God is the one who enables us to work in the first place. So in my time of prioritizing work and school excellence throughout high school and college and also work, I never would have said that Jesus wasn't number one in my life, but that's how I was acting. There were some signs of my idolatry. For example, I had noticed that I couldn't even say the word Jesus, even if I was at church for some reason. After I quit, I remember that maybe a year ago, I had a person come up to me at church and say, you should pray for your throat like this so that you can speak up. And I didn't really know what they meant, and so but I still did that, and I just prayed for myself, and I was like, it can't hurt. I didn't know until after I had quit that that was probably referring to how I couldn't even say the name Jesus at church. I couldn't even say anything about my faith. I was realizing that I was letting worldly worries choke out my faith, and I was realizing that I wasn't being a good steward of my faith and also my spiritual gifts. I'm not saying that everyone should go ahead and quit their jobs, because it's all about what God calls you to do, and God might be calling you to stay in your job and to have a corporate job at this time in your life. What I am saying and what I hope is that you should trust God, have a relationship with Jesus Christ, receive the Holy Spirit, live by the Spirit, walk by faith, and just be very careful to test your heart and test your life to make sure that there isn't some idol that is putting itself ahead of Jesus, because when that happens and it plays out in your life, it will have a negative effect on both your life and other people around you. I really think that it was a mercy for God to have all this happen so quickly so that I could notice the effects so quickly. I also just want to point out the mercy and grace of God, because I would have never said that I was an idolater, but that's what I was doing, and God had saved me out of that, called me out of that, and then showed me what I was doing. So in the same way, it says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God didn't expect us to be all perfect before He died for us. It was impossible for us to be perfect, but He saved us first, and then He starts to transform our lives. I was realizing afterwards that, in order to be saved, we say Jesus is Lord, and we believe in our hearts that God raised Him from the dead. And I was not, letting Jesus be Lord in my life. I was letting myself or, my work be Lord of my life.